Good morning. Welcome back to our weekly professional insights, where we feature different financial professionals from the National Referral Network to help you coordinate your financial team and turn your financial plans from good to great. And this morning, I'm excited to talk to Matt Rosenthal, estate planning and business attorney out of Florida. And today we're going to talk about an interesting topic because Matt's one of those individuals that's an estate planning attorney and a business attorney, like I mentioned. But we're going to talk about the importance of estate planning process for business owners specifically. We talk a lot about estate planning for individuals, but today we're going to talk about businesses. So before we get going, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell, all of the things that you need to do to help us bring this information to you in all the mediums that we have. So good morning, Matt. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Well, I appreciate you being on here, and we like to keep these relatively short. Now, our viewers understand sometimes I go off on tangents, so we'll jump into this real quick, Matt. Uh, we've talked about estate planning, but let's talk about why it is particularly important for business owners.
Business owners have two sets of things to deal with when they're planning their estate plan. One is going to be the personal side that we all deal with when we're doing estate planning. But on the business side, there's some factors that we need to take into consideration. Some of those things might include, how do I pass this business along if I pass away? Who's going to take over? Who can make decisions? Do I want the business to continue to be running, or do I want the business to shut down? All of these questions need to be answered. And when you're doing your estate plan for your personal side, you can't forget to do the estate planning for the business side, because what happens is, if you forget one, half of your assets might be protected, but the other half might have to go through that probate process. And most businesses do not survive the probate process if it has to go through it. So we want to make sure that everything is taken care of.
So, this is something I learned from you just before we even got on here, that there is a probate process for business owners, like for businesses.
Yeah,
Is that the same as for the personal assets?
that's correct. Yeah. So it's the same court process that we're talking about, probate being the court process of going through and having a judge oversee your assets and determining who gets what and how many debts need to be paid off to who. But essentially speaking, the only assets that go through the probate process are those that are in your personal name alone at the time of death. So when we're taking into consideration everything that we're talking about within terms of your assets specifically, if you're the sole owner of the business and you pass away and it was just in your name, then those assets need to go through the probate process to get somebody, usually your personal representative or executor, depending on what state you're in, different names for the same thing.
Yep.
But get that person authorized to be able to do things for the business, whether that's pay your employees, whether that's close down the business, all those sorts of things. If you don't have the right business documentation in set up, then you have to go through that court process. But there are ways to set it up that you don't have to go through that process.
So my understanding is every state's different with probate and the statutory costs of that, et cetera. So I'm a business owner, Matt. I've got my personal assets. I've got my business assets. Would I pay like a statutory fee for my personal assets and my business assets? I mean, is it two separate probates?
No, so it's
Okay.
one probate, and the fee, again, you're correct, is dependent upon your state. So when I'm speaking to clients here in Florida, I usually say the minimum that a family might have to spend on probate is going to start about 3,500 to 4,500.
Okay.
That's just at a minimum. But if you're actually looking at the state statute for probate in Florida, it's a percentage statute. So it changes based on how much in assets, the dollar value that you actually have. And so you can get one attorney that charges you $5,000 for a probate. You can also get a different attorney to charge you $30,000 for the probate for the same exact assets, just because one's using the statute and one might not be. And the statute is going to be the higher number that I gave you.
Okay. So, and so I've asked other attorneys this, and I'll ask you the same thing, because obviously with the business, the valuation, and we'll get into that question because I want to know how to do this side of it. But if a business is worth 10 million, so I want to get the math straight. If the business is worth 10 million, and let's say an attorney is going to cost $20,000 for a business owner to put as an example, to put together an estate plan. But if it's a percentage of assets, wouldn't paying that 20 million to do an estate plan be cheaper than going through a percentage of a $10 million company?
Well, I think you meant 20,000 because if
Or
you pay me 20 million, I don't think
yeah,
it's
yes, correct. 20,000. Yeah.
but,
Correct.
but yes, in theory, yes, it is cheaper it is less expensive to set it up ahead of time, not only because we can make sure that it doesn't go through that court process, and so there's no additional fees after you pass away, but usually the most important consideration is not the cost of going through probate, but the time it takes to go through it. Here in
Okay.
Florida, it can take minimum 6 months to a year just before anything actually happens. And so during that time, if you don't have the right paperwork set up and you actually do need to go through the probate process, then what happens is that business fails. It goes from however much you're making to zero because you do not have anybody authorized to access those bank accounts to pay your employees. So your employees leave. With no employees, they're not doing any work, the business fails. So by putting the proper paperwork into place, doing the planning that's necessary for your business, you can make sure that the business can just continue. Just operate as normal, even though something just happened to you. And so that's what we're trying to do.
So with that, Matt, you got payroll. Obviously, you've got accounts payable. You've got a lot of financial things going through a business for the operation standpoint. What are some of the common common mistakes that business owners make in their estate planning in general? Like you've talked about a couple of those, but what do they need to be considering?
First, they have to make sure that their business is actually taken into consideration in their planning. That's the biggest thing, is usually the business is left out.
Okay.
The second thing that they have to do is they have to decide what they want to do with the business after they pass away. That's kind of the most important question that has to be asked, and many business owners don't understand or don't know the answer right away when you ask it. Do you want it to continue? Do you want to pass it to family? Do you want to sell it? Does your family that you want to pass it to actually want to run the business for you? Those are the questions that have to be answered before we can decide any type of paperwork that needs to be put into place to make it happen. You have to know what you want to do. You have to have those conversations with family. Some of this then involves utilizing maybe an insurance policy, a key person plan, or life insurance policy that will pay for something. Usually it's to pay for your replacement. Sometimes it's to pay for just to buy out a partner if the partner is the one that passes away, depending on what happens. And then do you want to sell the business to a competitor if something happens to you, or do you just want it to shut down and finish operation for whatever's in play at the time and then close? So all of these decisions have to be made, and at least as far as today is concerned, and put that paperwork into place. Later on, you can say, no, I don't want to do it this way anymore. I want to do it this way, and we can change. But we have to make sure that something's in place today.
So there's a couple of things in there, Matt, that kind of tossed up some red flags here. The first is we talk to business owners all the time about getting together an exit plan, succession plan, which includes all of these things. So it would be prudent for a business owner to get those things together, those plans together before coming to you.
Either before or during the process. So I can help have those conversations with a client and kind of guide them in the questions that they need to be asking. But ultimately, the decision, if you're a sole proprietor, is going to be yours. But where it becomes more complicated is when you have partners. You have to have that conversation with your partners to determine what's going to happen. It's not a decision you can make on your own, and it's not usually something that you as the individual in a partnership can kind of decide for the business in and of itself. You might want to pass it to your children, your shares, but your partner doesn't want to become partners with your kids. So what are we supposed to do? It has to be determined between the parties, and that all that stuff goes into the partnership documents, the LLC documents, the corporate documents, to make sure that the way it's passing and the way you want to become partners with the next generation or not is put into place.
And this is where instruments like life insurance can come into play, right? Because you have, in that scenario, you mentioned kids. I always throw a little bit more of a wrench into the question, meaning if you're a business owner and you have a partner, do you want your wife's spouse involved in the business tomorrow if something happens to your partner, right? And the resounding
Mhm.
answer is like the kids, they're kind of they hem and haw. And I don't mean to pick on spouses, but
Mhm.
I've never heard of I've never talked to a business owner that said, yes, I want my partner's spouse in my business.
Mhm.
And so this is where some of these key man buy sell agreements, some of these life insurance products can help eliminate some of this confusion.
So it does. Those things are the key factors in putting the plans into place.
Okay.
So we first have to determine what you actually want to happen,
Yep.
right? So you don't want to become partners with your partner's spouse. So that might involve that life insurance policy that is used as the buyout for the buy sell agreement. Because one of the things that you might not want to do as a business owner is pay that out of your operating expenses,
Correct.
operating account. Because what happens then is that you're draining your operating account and now you don't have enough money to actually run the business. So we use those life insurance policies as those buyouts. And we say, okay, that's going to be the number. That's what it is. You get that. Then you have the key person policies, which is essentially just a life insurance policy, but this one is to replace you. Are you the main employee of, let's say, the automobile detailing center? You're the only one that can do the detailing. And so if something happens to you, now the business needs to replace you or they fail. So that key person policy is used to hire that replacement. So it's kind of the same insurance policy, but just thinking about it two different ways and having it for two different reasons. So one policy is for the replacement, one policy is for the buyout. And so that helps determine kind of how it gets done once you've determined what you actually want to do.
Now, Matt, we talk about business valuation, and I like how we're talking about this conversation because one of the things that we do with the network is help build these teams, Matt. And I'm not trying to plug the network, but what I'm trying to convey is the importance that we can't work in silos, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you do is extremely important, but to have somebody that can structure a life insurance policy to meet the demands of the estate plan are important because there's a lot of people that think their businesses are multi-million dollar businesses and in fact they may not be.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is how often should a business owner or owners evaluate their estate plan, their exit plan, and ultimately these products that may or may not be incorporated in their plan?
So estate plans, I usually tell people on the personal side, every 1 to 3 years, you should be looking at it and
Okay.
making sure that everything's still going the way in which you want it to go. I would kind of shorten that for business owners every
Okay.
year.
Every year.
You should be taking a look and making sure this is still the way I want to do things. This is still what I want to happen to my business. I now want my kid to take over. I now want my spouse to take over. As before, no, I just wanted them to be paid out and let my partner handle. I want to make sure that certain things are in place to enable the business to be shut down or to continue to run, and that kind of goes to: am I in a business that requires a license? I'm an attorney. I have a license. Realtors have a license. Doctors have a license. They cannot. Those businesses, generally speaking, depending on your state, cannot be run by somebody without one of those licenses. So
Gotcha.
if something were to happen to me tomorrow and I didn't have anything in place, my spouse, who is not an attorney, would get 50% equity ownership in my business, but have no decision making power, no nothing, just kind of be allowed to get the money that I would have been able to get, but can't actually run anything, can't make any decisions. So my partner, who would have the other 50% ownership, also really can't really make any decisions because they don't have the 51%. So
Gotcha.
now you're stuck in this where a partner in a licensed field has to negotiate with a non-licensed spouse to buy them out.
Hmm.
Where it wouldn't have been much easier to have agreed between the two licensed partners what would happen, and this would be the buyout amount, whether it's that insurance policy that we talked about, or maybe a payoff over a certain number of years, whatever that's going to be, but putting it into place ahead of time so that way now you don't have a spouse and a partner fighting.
Okay. So now you have a spouse and a family fighting. We'll kind of expand that. You know, the partner has 3 kids, 4 kids. They don't think that it's fair. I mean, let's just say everything's in line. The buy sell agreement, there are so many things in line that the two partners talked about and wanted.
Mhm.
The family doesn't agree. I mean, what can the family do, or can the family fight? Because I hear these stories, but are they real? Can the family do anything to get more out of that business?
Generally speaking, no. One,
Okay.
if you prepare the documents the right way, that's set in stone. They're essentially contracts between you, your partner, the business, all those entities, and you've agreed to what's going to happen. Now, on the practicality side, I always like to say we live in the United States of America, and anybody can sue anybody for anything. Does
Yeah.
that mean that they win? No, not necessarily, but the fees, costs, and expenses of defending something like that, can hurt a business, can
Yep.
hurt the personal assets of families. But it's just like really any contract that you put into place. You have the terms and things that are in there that, yes, somebody can sue on if something goes wrong, but if everything is following what we put into place and nobody's breaching the agreement, then generally speaking, there's really no leg to stand on when it comes to suing, from the family suing a partner for more.
Okay. And Matt, I know once again I went over time a little bit. Um, any final thoughts or recommendations, or kind of words of wisdom that you can offer the viewers that may be watching this?
Your business planning and your estate planning are one and the same. Do not let anybody tell you that you don't have to do one or the other when you're doing one of them. They both work together. It is important to make sure that the documentation that you put together on the estate planning side works in tangent with the documentation you put on the business side, and vice versa. If you do one and leave out the other, then you're just asking for something wrong to happen when you pass away, and things not to go as smoothly as you would like them to. So work with professionals that can do both, or if you can't find them, work with 2 professionals, one that will do the estate planning, that will do the business planning, that will work together to make sure both plans work. But if you can find somebody that can do both together at the same time, I would think that would be a better situation.
Totally be a better situation. Matt, I certainly appreciate it. If you have any questions, you guys, Matt's website's below. Leave questions in the comments. We can get those questions to Matt, help facilitate and coordinate a call with him if necessary. But please, we're here every Tuesday with professionals like Matt to help you make better decisions financially and help you build the financial team that you need to move forward. And so, Matt, we want to thank you, appreciate your time, and look forward to having you back on the show.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.